Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, and welcome to the InduSoft Web Studio webinar about trend control. My name is Fabio Teresino. I will be the host for this webinar, and we have a very complete agenda here covering different features from the trend control from InduSoft Web Studio. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about the internal structure and make it clear the distinction between the trend task that saves data and the trend control that displays the data on the screen. Then I'll talk about the different data sources supported by the trend control. It can display data from InduSoft tags, from external databases, even text files like CSV files. Then I will show how to change the x-axis from date time to numeric. So you can train data versus time, but you can also train data and show the information in XY plots. Talk about the vertical cursor, which is very important for analysis. Show how easy it is to change the orientation of the trend control and display vertical plots or horizontal plots depending on your needs. Extremely important for applications like drilling or chart recorders. And then we'll analyze the toolbar controls from the object as well as the legend, the statistical process control features built in on the trend control, some advanced settings, the native historian performance, some features that we have in the product to increase the performance even when you have to retrieve millions of points from the database. And then we'll show some sample applications, some example applications that demonstrate specific features of the trend control. It would not be possible to show all of them in details during this webinar in just 1 hour, but at least I will point you to example applications available to download from the InduSoft website, so you can use them as examples if you want to use those additional features. So getting started here with the internal architecture, InduSoft Web Studio has a trend task that is used to save data to the databases, and the trend control, which is used to display the data to the user. So if I come here to the development environment of InduSoft Web Studio, under tasks, I have trend, and I can configure one or more trend worksheets to save data to a history trend, either in the InduSoft proprietary format or into an external SQL relational database like SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, and so on and so forth. So the trend worksheet from InduSoft is executed in background by the background task, and that's the task that saves history data to the InduSoft proprietary files or to an external SQL relational database. The trend control, which you can create on the screens here using the graphical interface, is just the graphical element that retrieves data from the history files and displays data on the screen, or even online values from tags. In the history files, the data sources supported by the trend controls could be InduSoft proprietary files created by the InduSoft trend worksheets, the databases, external databases created by the InduSoft trend worksheets, or even any other database tables or even text files like CSV files created by any other systems. So the trend control has the ability to display information saved by InduSoft, but it has the ability to display information saved by pretty much any other system into a SQL relational database like Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, different databases, or even from text files like CSV files, for example. So I just want to make sure it's clear the distinction between the trend task here under tasks that saves data and the trend control that you create on the screens that reads data from the history and displays data on the screen. So talking about the different data sources supported by the trend control from InduSoft Web Studio, Probably the best way to describe this is to create a real example and show different data sources that can be used by InduSoft. So I can create a new application here, like trained webinar. Very well. And now in this trained webinar, I can create a new screen and create a trained control on this screen. Let's say something like this. And now in this trained control, if I double click, I have the object properties window. And here in points, I can create points or pens for the control. So the default data source is tag. So I can create tags here, like for instance, tag A and tag B. I can assign colors for each one of the pens. And I can define labels as well for each one of the pens. The labels could be any short description for the tags. In this case, I'm using the tag name itself. So just to see some values changing, I'm going to create a simple script here to simulate values for those tags. So I have here tag A will be a random value from 0 to 100. Same thing for tag B. Very well. Now I'm going to save this table, this screen, like with the name, let's say, data sources. Very well. And I can run this application. So when I run this application, you'll see the values for the tags tag A and tag B changing here, and the trained control show those values on the screen. However, if I close the screen or close the application and open the screen again, the trained control starts over drawing the pens, because the trained control is not saving those values anywhere. The trained control does not save any data. So it has the ability to display online values for those tags at this moment. If I want to have the ability to show the history of values for those tags in the trained control, then I can go to tasks under the trained worksheet and configure a trained worksheet to save the values from tag A and tag B at different events. In this case, I'm using save on trigger with the second tag, so those values will be saved into the history every second. And I define here the format, for instance, proprietary. So let's save this trained worksheet. Very well. So now if I go to the trained control, I see the values. The values are changing there, just like before. But if I close the screen or stop the application and run again, notice that the trained control automatically retrieves the history information and display this information on the screen, along with the new online data. So now the trained task is saving data, and the trained control is displaying online data as well as history data automatically on the screen. And it's very nice because the trained control does not have, you don't have to change anything on the trained control telling to grab the history data or where the history data is. You just assign here the tag names, and the trained controls is smart enough to go to the history files wherever they are, retrieve the data and show the data on the screen. Just for information, the trained task from InduSoft Web Studio by default saves the trained history data into the HST subfolder of the application. So if I go here to the application folder and go to the HST subfolder, InduSoft creates one history file with the trained group number 01, year 12, month 03, and day 28.hst. So the trained task creates one file per group per day. And the trained control obviously displays the online data or the history data. I can pause here, see data from the past, play again. It's fully integrated for online and history data. Now, what if you want to save data, but you want to save data to an external SQL relational database, not into the InduSoft proprietary trained databases? InduSoft can save data to any external database like SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, whatever external database you have. In my case here, I'm going to use the Microsoft SQL Server just because it's installed in my computer, but could be any SQL relational database. So I'm going to create a new database in SQL Server called, for instance, Trained Webinar. There you go. So it's a brand new database. I have no tables, nothing here. So in InduSoft, I can link InduSoft to this database. I just go to Project, Options, and here I browse the database I want to use. In this case, it's going to be SQL Server, but could be Oracle, could be different databases. I define the server where the database is running. In this case, is a local one, but could be a remote one. And I select the database name. In our case, Trained Webinar. Test connection succeeded. So now InduSoft is linked to the database. So if I want to save data into an external database, I can create, for instance, another trained worksheet, create new tags here like tag C and tag D, for example, and change here the format from proprietary to database. So now the trained task will save information from the tag C and tag D into the external database. By default, in a table with the name trained and the number of the trained worksheet, but if you want, you can customize the table name as well. And now let's just create here a script to simulate values for tag C and tag D. So we see the values changing. Let's say tag C and tag D. And if I want to display those values on the screen, all I have to do is create a trained control. I'll just copy this one over. And here in points, define the tags that I want to display. Now I want to display the tag C and the tag D. Let's change the labels as well. Data source is still tag, doesn't matter where the tag values are saved. And if I run the application, InduSoft connects to the database, and this trained control displays information from tag A and B and retrieves history data from the proprietary files, and this other trained control shows the data from the tags C and D, retrieving data from the SQL Server database. And if I go back here to the database, InduSoft automatically created the table trained 002, and you see all the values here for the tag C and tag D, timestamp and the values for all the tags. And the trained control is smart enough to go to that database, retrieve the data, and show on the screen. Just a minute, we have some comments here about the audio. Some people are having issues with the audio. Just 1 minute, please. Hello everybody, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully the audio is back now, and we will resume the presentation in 1 minute. Okay. So going back, InduSoft Web Studio saved data into the external SQL relational database, and the trained control is able to retrieve the data from the database and show the information on the screen. Even if you want to display data from the proprietary database and from the history database on the same trained control, you can do that as well. So I have this trained control, and I just say I want to display data from tag A, tag B, tag C, and tag D. So tag A and B are being saved into the InduSoft proprietary database, and C and D into the SQL relational database. And during the runtime, the trend control is smart enough to bring the information from different data sources and show the information on the same trend control. Now, when you link tags to the trend control, we can display online data and history data, but sometimes you want to display history data on the trend control and you do not want to link to tags. You want to read directly from a database created by other system, or even from a text file like a CSV file created by other system. So I'm going to do a quick example here. So let's create here Notepad and create information like, for instance, 01/01/2012 at midnight. I will create a simple CSV file with values like 10, 40, and let's say 0, for example. Good enough. So let's say 1 second later, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. So the first column in this particular file is the timestamp. The second column will be a numeric value. The third column will be another numeric value, making different values here. And the third column will be a numeric value as well. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, for example. And I can save this file anywhere. For organization purposes, I'm going to save into the applications directory, like trained test.csv, for example. Very well. Now, if I want to display this information on the trend control, all I have to do is place the trend control on the screen, like here, and then double click on the trend control and create a new data source for the trend control, different from tags. So I click in data source, I create new, I give a name to this data source, like for instance text, define the type of this data source, in this case is a text file. Here is the number of the column with the value for the x-axis. The first column is the column 0. So since I want to use the timestamp as the x-axis, I write 0 here for the column 0. And here in data source, I just browse the file where the data is. In this case, trend test, using comma as the delimiter. And you can even use a string tag between braces, curly braces in the file field, so you can point to different files during the runtime. Very well. Now in points, instead of using tags, I'm gonna delete those. I change the data source to my text file, and I write here the name of the columns where the data is. Let's say that the first one is pressure, the next column is temperature, so column 1 and column 2, also from the data source text. Very well. Now, when I retrieve data from text files, this is essentially history data. So here in the toolbar, I'm going to create a tag here in run stop called RS. So I can set this tag to 0 to say show the trend control in stop mode, not in play mode. And I can also come here in axis, define start date and time, and say in this particular case I want to display the duration of 6 seconds. And the time is going to be a tag called start date time, which is a string tag. So by doing that, I can go to the screen attributes, and when I open the screen, I set the tag run stop to 0 to set the trend to stop mode, and I set the tag start date time with the value 01/01/2012, midnight, which is the value from the first column in the file for the column 0. So very well, if I run the application, I open the screen, InduSoft retrieves data from the file and shows the data here on the screen. So column 0 showing the date and time in a single column, date, space, time, and here the values from the next 2 columns in the file. And just like any other pen, you can always come back here and change things like the color of the pens, if you want to see markers or not. And here during the runtime, InduSoft shows the values from the text file within the screen. What if the data is available in a database, but this data was not saved by InduSoft? So to do something quick here, I can create a new table and create a column, for instance, called TS for timestamp, and then columns like C1, C2, C3. The first one is date time, and then I have integer values. Save this table as table 1. Very well. Let me close this one. And here in table 1, just to make a quick test, I can simulate some values. Let's say 1/1/2012 at midnight. And the next one is going to be 1 second later, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds is good. So 10, just simulate some values here. This one, 40, 30, 20, 10, 20, 30, 40. And really quick here, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. Very well. Now, if I want to display data from this table in the trend control, even though the values were not saved by InduSoft, could be values from saved by any other system, I use the trend control, I go to data sources, delete here the text data source, because now I want to create a new data source called, for instance, DB. And the data source is database, is not text file. X-axis field is the name of the column where I have the values for my x-axis. And here in data source, I select the table where there are the values I want to display. In this case, table 1. And I'll just make a small adjustment here, saying disabling milliseconds, because in the column I created, there is not an additional column for milliseconds. So I create my data source with the name DB using TS as the column for the timestamp. And here in points, I can create new points, like for instance, data source DB, display values from the column C1, C2, for example. So data source DB, read values from the column C2. This one in blue, this one in red. Save it. So now during the runtime, InduSoft goes to the database and shows the data from the database here on the screen. So this trend control is showing tag values saved into the InduSoft proprietary values, proprietary history files. This one tag values saved into an external database. This one values from a text file. And this one values from a database created by someone else, not by InduSoft. So those are the main data sources supported by InduSoft Web Studio. We also have the batch data source, and I'll show this in details in another application here. But just to sum up, if you want to read data from data sources different from tags, you just click in data sources, create a data source for text, for databases, and then when you create the pens, associate the pens with the data sources that you configured here. The x-axis can either be date and time, a timestamp, or can be numeric as well, in case you want to create some XY plots. So just to make a quick demonstration, I'm going to save this screen as, for instance, x-axis. Just to save time, I don't have to start from the scratch. There you go. And then I can display XY plots with information from either text files or from the database. For example, if I want to display in this trend control XY information, all I have to do is go to Axis, change the XX to numeric, define here the range like 0 to 60, and you can use tags here to change this range dynamically as well. And here in data sources, I will change the column for the x-axis. Instead of being the column 1, will be the column 3, the last column where I have the increasing values. And for the second trend, where I read data from the database, I change the axis to numeric, define also the range here, and in data sources, change the name of the column for the x-axis, like in this case the column C3. Save it, run it, and there you go. Now I have the data from the text file here in this trend, the data from the database in the second trend, but they are both showing numeric values on the x-axis. So it's that simple to create XY plots with the trend control from InduSoft Web Studio. Just to sum up, you just go to Axis and change the x-axis data type from datetime to numeric, and then define the range for the x-axis. Vertical cursor. This is something very powerful. Many customers use it, and very simple to configure as well. So if I go back to my previous screen here, the data sources, and run, notice that in every single trend control there is this vertical cursor. So if I pause here, for example, I can place this cursor anywhere, for instance here, and show the values of any pen, each pen, where this cursor is. Now, sometimes you want to know the value of the x-axis where the cursor is as well. So you can easily do that just by double-clicking on the trend control, coming here to Axis, and then you have the button for cursor. You can create a tag for position, like cursor position, can be any tag name. I decided to call cursor position. And this tag will receive a value from 0 to 100% according to the position of the cursor. And here, cursor value, which will receive the actual value of the x-axis where the cursor is. So I have cursor position, cursor value. I'll create a rectangle here just to display those values during the runtime. So I want to display here cursor position and cursor value. And if I save it, during the runtime, let me just make this rectangle a little bit smaller. Very well. So if I change the cursor position, notice that the cursor position goes from 0 to 100%, and the cursor value shows the actual value on the time here where I place the cursor. So I know, for instance, here that the value of tag A was 47, the value of tag B was 85 at this timestamp. And the cursor position not only returns the value, but allows you to change the value as well. So let me show with a slider here, just to make a quick demonstration. You can use this slider to control cursor position. Save. And as I change the value of the tag cursor position, I move the vertical cursor on the trend. So you can create scripts, maths, algorithms to move the cursor just by changing a tag value. So very useful. Orientation. This is a truly unique feature from InduSoft. There is no other SCADA package I know that can retrieve data from different data sources and display the information either in horizontal plots or vertical plots. So just to make a quick demonstration, sorry, I can save this screen as, for instance, vertical data source. And if I want to display the data from this trend control in vertical orientation instead of horizontal, I can go to Axis, under Position, and change the orientation to vertical. And I can do that for any other control here on the screen. Axis, Position, Vertical. This one, Axis, Position, Vertical. This one, Axis, Position, Vertical. And if I save and run, I have the same trend controls reading information from different data sources, but the orientation now is vertical. It's that simple to show vertical data on the trend. And in many cases, you would want, in this case, to redesign the trend controls, resize them, like do something quick here, like a little bit higher, like this. Then I can grab those other trend controls, go to Format, and say they should have the same size, and they should be aligned. So at this point, they are too close to each other. I'll make them further from each other and a little bit smaller. So okay, Format, same size, top aligned, same space between them. Save it, and there you go. You'll have different trend controls showing data in the vertical orientation. Very simple to do, built-in InduSoft Web Studio. Let's talk a little bit about the native tools from the object, like the toolbar, for example. I'll go back to the first screen here, the data sources. So InduSoft Web Studio has this built-in toolbar with many features. And if you double click on the control and go to toolbar, you can disable it and hide the toolbar altogether. Or you can display it, and if you display, you can define which controls, which icons from the toolbars should be visible or not during the runtime. And even if you want to create your own toolbar with your buttons, large buttons or different icons, you can create your buttons and just toggle tags associated to each one of the icons in this list here. So if I create a tag here, for instance, called toolbar period, I can create another button, and when I click on the button, I toggle the tag toolbar period, and it's equivalent to clicking on the period icon from the standard toolbar. Anyway, most of the features in the toolbar are self-explanatory, but you have here the option to pause the control and then go back in time, forth in time. And if you hit play again, it keeps updating the screen. Just a quick note, by default in play mode, the trend control is updated every second. If you want to change the rate at which the trend control is updated for online data, just change here under Advanced the updated trigger. For instance, if I change here to blink slow with toggles every 200 milliseconds, notice that the trend control now is updated much faster. It doesn't mean that the data will be saved every 200 milliseconds, because the trend control is not saving data, but the trend control will update the values on the screen at a faster rate based on this configuration. Blink slow or even blink fast. Blink slow changes every 600 milliseconds and blink fast every 200 milliseconds. So play and pause. You have here period, which allows you to define during the runtime a specific date and time, and InduSoft goes through the database. You define a period as well, like for instance, let's go back here to period and define the period of 2 minutes, for example. InduSoft goes through the database, retrieves the data, and shows the data on the screen. And you can change the start date and time, end date time using those built-in controls as well. You have many zooming options like window zoom. You click here and you zoom a particular area. You can cancel the zoom, undo the zoom option. You can also zoom only horizontally if you want. You can zoom only vertically if you want. Zoom in, zoom out, cancel zoom. So all the zooming options are built in the product. You have here legend properties. It allows you to add new columns to the legend, change the order of those values, and here InduSoft updates the legend during the runtime. You can change the look and feel of any pen either by clicking here or clicking here. I can say I want to display this pen in this green color and I want to be thicker, and it changes the look and feel of the pen during the runtime. You can remove pens on the fly. You can click here and add pens on the fly based on pre-configured pens on the trend control. You can use here, split the pens in individual channels, or click here again to see all the pens sharing the Y-axis. You can enable and disable the vertical cursor, auto scale, so InduSoft automatically, for instance, if I zoom this area and say auto scale, InduSoft automatically changes the min and max for each scale to display all the values that you have at this moment. The print button sends the trend control to the printer, and SPC allows you to show some statistical process control on the screen. Not only lines here, as you see here, average, minimum value, maximum value, standard deviation, but also on the legend. You see here the average, the standard deviation, the minimum and maximum values for the current selection. And as I change the selection, the values are recalculated automatically. So all those tools are available in the toolbar from the trend control, and they are available for any data source. Using SPC that I just demonstrated, you can show average, mean and max and standard deviation on the trend. We have the legend as well. If you want to customize the legend for the object during the development, you just click here and you can add as many columns as you want, customize the order of the columns, the width or label for the columns, so everything is easily customizable. And in advanced settings, I just want to point out some interesting features here, like for instance the option to save and load values. So I'm gonna save this screen with a different name, like let's say advanced. Very well, and I'm gonna keep this trend control here. So this option here, runtime configuration, allows you to save profiles into a file, profiles for the trend in a file, and load this profile later in time. So just a quick example, I'll create a tag here in the save trigger called save trigger, could be any name. Here in load trigger, I will create a tag called load trigger, and here in file name, I'll create a tag called file name. Very well. Now I can create buttons here. For instance, one button here to save. So when I click on this button, I toggle the tag save trigger. Another button here to load. So when I click on this button, I trigger the tag load trigger. And interface here for the file name. So just to do something quick, somewhere where I can type here a value for file name. And very well. So let's save this screen and run this screen. There you go. Very well. So let's say that I want to save the trend control with those pens with this duration as the trend profile ABC, for example. Save. And now I want to remove one pen and let's say change the period to 2 minutes and save this one as DEF. Save. So if I type here ABC and load, I load the trend with the profile, with the pens, with the period it had when I saved it as ABC. If I type DEF and load, I load the trend control with the settings I had when I saved as DEF. So you can create your own profiles with the pens that are useful for each profile and load those profiles again during the runtime. There is here in advanced settings, you also have the option to export the trend control to a picture file like a JPEG bitmap, and you just define here, very similar to the runtime config, a trigger in the name of the file that will receive the picture with the trend control, and then send this picture by email or add to a report, do whatever you want with it. And decimation is the option to configure the trend object to read data, a lot of data from an external database with, for instance, millions of points, and optimize to the most this query. So as a rule of thumb, when you create a trend control, you know the width of this trend control, like in this case is 658 characters. And if you come here and you set these max points to the number of pixels in the width of the trend control, it will just bring one value for each pixel in the trend control. So even if you have 1 million of points in the database, we filter this data and we bring only the minimum necessary information to display the pens with complete resolution, with high resolution. So it's the most optimized way to retrieve data from databases, even when you are retrieving a lot of data, like 1 year worth of data. If you're saving at a faster rate, could end up being millions of records. So decimation is a way to improve performance for large projects. Finally, there are the point options. There is, at least when you come here to points and you have each one of the pens, you have options for those pens. The break interval is the number of seconds between two samples. So, for instance, 7,200 is the default value. You can change, for instance, 60 seconds. What happens is, if the time between two samples is equal or larger than this break interval, InduSoft does not draw a line between those 2 points. So, for instance, if you know that you should save data every 45 seconds, so you can define the break interval, for instance, to 60. So if there is no sample within 60 seconds, it means the application was not running. So instead of linking those points, we just show a blank area between those 2 points. If you leave in blank, we always link the points no matter what. And this x-axis offset is a very powerful tool and very simple to use, especially when you want to analyze pens, the same pen, the same value, the same tag, or different tags at different times. Like, for instance, I will create here a x offset tag. And to make a quick test here, I'll create a slider where I change the value of the tag x offset between plus 60 seconds minus 60 seconds, for example. So I run it. Right now those 2 pens are synchronized, and if I change the value of the offset, I scroll the value of the first pen plus 60 seconds or minus 60 seconds in reference to the other pen. So you could, for instance, compare, let's say, the pressure today with the same pressure yesterday, or a profile period versus the current period, and so on and so forth, just by changing one tag associated with the x-axis offset. Now, just for sake of time, I'd like to show some sample applications available to download from the InduSoft website. So if you come here to InduSoft.com, under support, you have sample applications, and there are dozens and dozens of applications here. I just listed some sample applications that are use the trend control, like for instance the trend annotation ID. So I can open this application here, trend annotation ID, and run it. In the trend annotation ID application demonstrates how you can allow the user to enter comments, write comments on top of the trend control. For example, I can pause here and let's say double click here and write a comment like anything like relay failure, something like that. And InduSoft writes the comment right there, and if I play again, the comments are moved along with the pens. And I can add more comments if I want. I can even zoom out here, auto screen scale, pause, and right here I want to display a low limit value, for example. And let's say this is a critical situation I want to show with a larger font. So it shows there low limit value. So I can keep adding as many comments as I want on top of my trend, and I can go even here to edit comments and see where the comments are and even delete all the comments, delete just one comment. Like for instance, I want to delete here the relay failure. So delete, are you sure? Yes. Now it's gone. I just have this other one here. So it's a simple application that shows how to add comments. In the real important interface to add comments is here in the data source. This annotation source is a table in the database where you save all the comments from the user. So this is one of the sample applications available to download from the InduSoft website. The comments can be dynamically controlled. They are just values that either the user type or they are just values in a table in the database. So you can change dynamically those comments any way you want. And with this sample application, it becomes very clear how to do that. There is another application called Trend Database to CSV, which shows how to export data from a trend history table in the database to a CSV report. So let's open this application here. It is available to download from the website as well. And if I run this application, I see some values there. Could be online values, history values. And if I click here, export to CSV, I just give a name to the file, like for instance test, and say export. It exported the data, and if I click here in view, it will open Microsoft Excel, and it will display the exported data in Microsoft Excel. So I have here timestamp and all the values for the period that you select in the trend. And if you want to do something like I want one value per minute, then this function automatically calculates the average for each one of the points and creates a report only with one value per minute, the average per minute. So as you see here, I just have 3 values, 3 minutes within this period. And could be by hour, by quarter, by month, by any way you want it. And the value of this application is one function called exportDB to CSV, which is fully documented here. You can literally copy this application, this function from this example to your project. and then just call this function, defining the target report file, the database connection name, table name, period of time, and InduSoft this function will automatically export data from the database into a CSV report, just like I demonstrated here. Another application that could be useful for you is this one called Studio HST Server. This application, Studio HST Server, from everything I showed so far, is the only interface that's not available for Windows CE, but it uses a web service, a COM server from InduSoft called Studio HST to export data from the InduSoft proprietary files, not a database, but the InduSoft proprietary files, to a CSV report, a CSV database as well. So just like the other example, I click here to export to CSV, define the name of the file, and if I come here to view data, I select the file, and I show the data here, and I can open this file with Excel as well. So this one is a useful way to export data from the InduSoft proprietary files to a CSV report. If you want to do that from a Windows CE device, then you can use the function HST2TXT, which does pretty much the same function, the same thing. And finally, we have this simple application called TrendBat2, also available to download from our website. And it demonstrates how to save and load data from a batch trend report with InduSoft Web Studio. So I can give a name to this batch, like for instance batch, let's say webinar A, start the batch. So when I start the batch, the values for those tags are being saved with this batch name. And then I can stop here and then give another name like webinar B and start the batch webinar B and stop it quicker, so it's a shorter batch. And if I want to load, for instance, webinar A, I see the value saved during the batch webinar A. If I select webinar B, I load the value saved during the webinar B, and so on and so forth. So you can save and load your batches with different names, and the names of the batches can obviously be written to tags automatically based on barcode scanners or data from the PLC or any other input, as well as the user input, just like in this example. So with this, I would like to open for questions and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box from the WebEx or even in the chat box. So we have some questions here. One is about the presentation. This PowerPoint presentation and the video will be made available to all attendees of this webinar. So you will receive an email within 24 or 48 hours with the link to download this PowerPoint presentation as well as the video, so you can follow the examples and all the instructions. So one question is about the comments, if the comments can be dynamically controlled with a tag, and that's exactly how we did that with this Trend Annotation ID application available to download from our website. When the user clicks on the trend control to type a value, what we show is this window, and this is a tag where the user types the comments. So yes, you can change the comments just automatically or manually just by writing a value to a tag. How much data can be saved into the proprietary HST file? Very good question. The answer is we do not define a limit. The real limit will be the hard disk space in your computer. However, depending on the computer power from your hardware and the number of tags that you are saving into the HST file, this file can get really big really fast. The rule of thumb, I would say, if you are saving data into the HST proprietary files, create up to 100 or tops 140 tags or so in each worksheet, because each worksheet will create a different file. So by this way you make sure the files don't get huge, like gigabytes or terabytes for each file. So the time to query data from those files is much smaller. Moreover, here in Advanced, you can define what we call history lifetimes in days for each trained worksheet. Doesn't matter if you save to the proprietary files or to an external database. So for instance, if I type here 30 days, InduSoft will automatically delete the history data from this worksheet, which is older than 30 days. And I can create different history lifetime for different trained groups. So one group of tags could be kept for 30 days, another one for 1 year, another one for 2 months. If you leave in blank, InduSoft never deletes the data, but in this case you need to make sure you have enough storage memory to keep this data for a long period of time in your computer. One question is if the user can view data from a remote thin client. Very good question. InduSoft supports different types of web thin clients, like the web thin client, the secure viewer thin client, and everything I showed here for the trained control is 100% compatible and available to the web thin client. So all those features can be used on the web thin client as well. Can we change the sampling rate at which the data is collected? Yes, you can. Remember that the data collection is done by, data collection, you have 3 phases. You have data collection, you have data saving into the proprietary files or databases, and you have data presentation on the trained control. The data collection is controlled by the communication driver that is reading data, or OPC client module that is saving data. So you have controls there to define how fast you are acquiring data, and there is always a physical limit from the network, from the computer power that you're using. But you can configure as much as possible the sampling rate to read data from the controllers using the driver or the OPC interface. Then in the trained worksheet, you define here how often you want to save those values into the history file. For instance, I can create a tag here, save trigger, create this tag, yes, and go here to the schedule and say here every, let's say 100 milliseconds, so 000.1, I want to make the tag save trigger be not save trigger. So toggle the tag save trigger every 100 milliseconds. With this configuration, I'm telling the trained worksheet to save data into the history files or history database every 100 milliseconds. And obviously, it also depends on the computing power and everything else to make sure that this time period will be respected. Since it's not a real-time software like a PLC, most likely the difference between the samples will be 100 milliseconds or 105 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds again, 120 milliseconds. So you can experience some variance between the samples there when you go to anything below 1 second. Let's see, we have some additional questions here. Can you put the legend on right or left side of the trained graph? The legend for the trained, you can build your own legend, but if you use the built-in legend from InduSoft, the legend itself is always at the bottom of the trained control. but the scales, the legend, the scale values for the trend can be positioned anywhere. So if I open here the original application, the trend webinar, there you go, really quick, I can go to the data source screen, and here under axis you can define in position where you want the placement of the scales, and if they go left to right, up to down, whatever it is. So you can define where the scales appear, and the legend will be always on the top, on the bottom. Can the user select tags during the runtime? Yes, we did that during the runtime. If I just run here, I can remove those pens just by clicking on this icon, add pen. The user can select a tag and add it to the trend control during the runtime. So the user can add and remove tags, pens to the trend control during the runtime. Can all trend data be saved into one table in the database? You can save all data in one table if you have all data in one trend worksheet. So each worksheet, each trend worksheet in InduSoft would be saving data to one table in the database. The legends. The question is if the legend is shown when you export file or the trend graph. If you export the trend control using this option here to export to file, the legend is exported as long as you enable to show the legend. If you uncheck this checkbox, the legend is not displayed and it's not exported to the graphical file. One question is if the user comments are saved. Yes, they are saved in a table in the database, and it becomes clear with the sample application that's available to download. Does InduSoft include some tool to explore or query a database created with the trending purpose? I think the question is more for troubleshooting, and the answer is yes. If you right click here, go to settings and enable what we call database messages. If the trend control tries to query data from the database and for instance it fails, the output window shows the actual query executed by the trend control here in the output window. And in this webinar, we didn't create anything very complicated. But when you use a data source database, InduSoft automatically does the query like this. Select whatever you have here in those fields. So let me go to the database query. So this one. So the data source is database. So InduSoft does select whatever you have on these fields. So select C1, C2 from whatever you have in these fields here, table, where the timestamp, this timestamp is lower than this limit or greater than the end limit. If you want to tell InduSoft not to execute the where automatically, you can go to Advanced and click on Ignore X Filter. And in this case, here in Data Sources, you can, after the table name, you can add whatever statements you want here. Where tag name is equal to ABC, order by TS, ascending, whatever you want there. And if you want to concatenate tags here to these statements, just write your tags between curly braces. So you can customize any SQL statement to query data with the trend control. One question here is a project that monitors 40 thermocouples. If there is a way you can tell the program which thermocouples to monitor and record from the 40 thermocouples. You can, for each tag, my recommendation would be to configure a trained worksheet with the 40 thermocouples. And on the trained control, just use the interface to add or remove pens for the thermocouples that should be visualized and save it as a profile, just like I did here during the webinar. But if you have more specific questions, just send an email to me or call me later. My email is fabio.souza@indusoft.com, and I'll be happy to work with you in your specific project. Can the code load tags to a trained? Not sure if I understood the question, but you can easily, if you want to add all the tags to the trained control, you can just copy here all the tags from the project tags, come here to the points and paste here the tag names to the trained control. So this would be one way of doing that. Can we plot X, Y values from tags? You can if you create two arrays, one array for the X values and another array for the Y values. And in this case, you would use one trained called legacy trained. So you can come here to more comments and graphic tools and graphics. And there is this trained legacy control here. You can add it here to the quick bar, and then you can click here and create this legacy trained control. And in this one, you can define the curve type to XY and define here one array tag like X array starting on the first element and say the number of points, for instance, 10 elements. And here in pens, you define the tag, for instance, Y starting on the first element, and InduSoft automatically shows 1 point for X index 1, Y index 1, and links it to X index 2, Y index 2, and so on and so forth. There is a sample application that shows that on the InduSoft website as well. Another question is about redundant database setup, local and remote. Yes, it's fully supported. Unfortunately, we don't have time to show all this here now. However, if you go to the InduSoft website, here under support, you have here videos and webinars. And there is one webinar here for database connectivity and redundancy, and if you just click here, you can watch this webinar, and we talk in details, step by step, how to use redundancy when saving and retrieving trained data, alarm data, any kind of data from databases. One question. Can you demonstrate trained time scale navigation showing the same time periods on another date? It is really quick here what we have demonstrated before. I think it's in the advanced screen. Yes, right there. So it's very simple. For the point that you want to scroll back or forth, you come here to options, define an integer tag in the field x-axis offset, and just by changing the value of this tag during the runtime, you offset, you scroll this pen over time, either forward if you have negative values, or backward if you have positive values in this tag. So this tag here, whatever tag you define in the x offset field, defines the number of seconds that you want to offset your pen, backwards or forward. And again, if you have specific questions about your particular application, I can address that individually as well. A good question here, what's the fastest rate that is practical for logging data when the trained background task is into a database if the number of tags is, let's say, 200 tags? It depends on how fast the computer is, but for instance, for 100 tags, we conducted a benchmark test some time ago, and doing some tweaks on INI files from InduSoft, we were able to save 100 tags into Microsoft SQL Server database as fast as one sample each 60 milliseconds. So this is pretty much the fastest that we were able to save data. And actually another bottleneck is how fast we can acquire data from the actual PLC. In cases where you need something faster, like, oh, I need one value every 10 milliseconds or 1 milliseconds, whatever it is, like for instance for vibration analysis, you need to collect data and save data really fast. The way it works is typically the controller, the physical data acquisition hardware, keeps collecting the data and saving this data into a local file in the controller, and InduSoft reads this data in blocks or receives the file via FTP and then exports this data to the database. The trained control itself has precision to display values on the trained control with precision of up to 1 milliseconds. So as long as you buffer the data in the controller and we can get this block of information and export it to the database, we can display the information with precision of up to 1 milliseconds. Can you add a tag to the trained worksheet at any time? Very good question. The answer is yes. If it is a database, if the data source, if the format is database, no problem at all. InduSoft will automatically create a new column in the database and it will keep saving the values in the other column. If the history format is proprietary and you try to add a new column there, then when you try to save the worksheet, InduSoft warns you that this change will take place only in the next day, because since we create one file per day, within the same file you cannot have a different number of tags. Okay. Can you save data on a trained with the value minor to 1 second? It's similar to the previous question, and the answer is yes. Is it possible to have the time axis fixed and the trend going to the right for some period, for example 1 hour? Yes, if I understood, the idea is you can either do like this, keep the period fixed and change the start time, or you can leave the start time fixed and increase or decrease the period, like this. And here I'm doing manually, but since on the configuration you can add tags here under axis, one tag for the duration and another tag for the start date and time, then you can control how the data is, how the period is changing or how the start time is changing just by changing tag values. Will decimation allow trains to load quicker through a WebThing client when looking across a large amount of data? Yes, that's pretty much the main advantage. In the webinar about database, we talked about this in details, but the decimation provides a much better performance, especially if you are visualizing a large amount of data from thin clients, because in the past, or without decimation, we would need to pass all the values queried from the database to the thin clients via TCP/IP, and now we just send the minimum number of points necessary to plot the object. Pretty much the number of points that you define here. So the answer is yes, it is faster. I think the question is what statistical data analysis tools are readily available in InduSoft, like mean, max, average, and things like that. The information in the trend control, if you go to SPC, we can display here on the control lines for the average, mean and maximum value, and standard deviation. And here in the legend, we can show those values. So let me customize the legends here. We can show here standard deviation, minimum value, maximum value. Count is the number of samples, and average. We can display that as numeric values on the legend. And if I just go here, the values are automatically updated. And if you do not want to show on the legend, you can always go here to the SPC column for any point and link tags to those statistical process control values and display them with other objects. I think another question here. No more, just some good comments here. With that, I would like just to show here again the contact information for InduSoft. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. And I would like to thank each one of you for taking the time for this webinar. Thank you very much for the questions, and hopefully it was useful for you, and I expect to see you again in the next webinar in 1 or 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.